everyone, my name is Rochelle Innocent and I'm the founder and CEO of Project Purpose. Welcome to our channel. Our community is focused on fostering the intellectual and character development in children. We do this through our parent-child workshops that are focused on 4 themes: autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept, in order to cultivate grit, perseverance, and resilience in each child. And we are so thrilled to be offering one of the first of its kind digital, virtual, and continuous learning environments, enabling parents and children to connect from all around the world. Here at Project Purpose, our overarching mandate is to renew and rebuild family, community, and relationships. Our different social media platforms provide us with an opportunity to have discussions and to create space for all topics that relate to family, community, and relationships with ourselves as well as with others, with a primary focus on mental health and education. More precisely, the ways that the institutions of mental health and education play a role and have played a role in our societies at large. These discussions and debates provide us with an opportunity to think critically about what needs to change within these structures for us to live up to our bold slogan: support, protect, and empower each child through youth-focused development, better known as leadership in juvenescence. We recognize that in valuing our children's leadership potential, this also translates as recreating and co-creating environments, both socially and politically, that will enable our children to thrive. For those of you who are particularly keen on the topic, we also write thought pieces every other Monday. We actually dropped a thought piece this past Monday, so definitely be sure to meander over to the website and check out our online content. Now, if it is the case that you are looking for a listening alternative, well, we're available wherever podcasts are playing, and we've provided you with access to a few links down below. Now, as is the convention, be sure to subscribe, hit that post notification bell. We are not that great at growth strategy, but if we've given you content that you can put into practice, join our community of game changers. Let's get into it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week-by-week basis. And today's topic of discussion is education. On the conversation on education this week, I want to talk about the difference, the demarcation between persistence and persuasion, and how you can become more persuasive in the conversations and the ways that you communicate when the communication in and of itself matters. And so what's really, really important to gauge, to take out of this conversation, is the role that you play when there is a message that you feel is very important to land. And so communication is very different from talking. And also, for those of you who are not aware, my academic background is in professional writing, specializing in technical communications. So that is my specialty on top of cognitive neuroscience, which is the study of human behavior and the cognitions that drive our behaviors, as well as an MBA, which gave me an opportunity to put these 2 schools of thought into practice on a day-to-day basis. So I can tell you a thing or two about communication that you can put into practice into your own life that's going to enable you to really support your need to feel heard. And so that's what I want to talk about today, because I think that a lot of us fail to recognize what's within our scope of responsibility when it comes to us being heard. In fact, I will go as far as to say that if it is the case that we are not heard, then we have not done our job in communicating effectively. The central theme of communication is that we package our message in a way that it's going to land. So communication in and of itself is an act of service. It can't be egocentric. It can't be self-serving. When you are communicating, you are crafting that message for the audience that you're targeting. And so that's whether or not you're crafting a message for a TED Talk, you're crafting a message for a presentation in an academic setting or at home, or you're crafting a message to speak to your parent, to speak to your sibling, to speak to your partner, your best friend, whomever. When you find that there's a lot at stake, or you put a lot of significance in what it is that you're hoping to share, then it is your job to package your messaging. And so this is different because when we're just talking, when we're kind of shooting from the hip, we don't need to really think about how the audience is taking in that information, right? It's just kind of shooting back and forth. There's nothing of deep significance being discussed in those situations. But when you find that there is a point that needs to be heard, then it is your job to package that message. And so I'm here to talk about the different ways that we can package that message effectively so that it lands. And when it lands, how you know that your message and that your communication has landed is you feel heard. So these are some of the things that you need to kind of keep in mind. And this is going to be super high level, and of course I can do a deeper dive in it, but this is how I begin to do my building blocks for building my communication. And so the first step, and I've said this this so many times anytime I've talked about communication, is you cannot communicate to someone if you do not know them. You need to know them as much as possible, right? You need to know who your target audience is. And it's not just about knowing, what their name is and, what their gender is and what their political stance is. It's like you really need to understand how this person takes in information and how they value information. And that's going to help you package your communication. And so this can be a combination of learning styles, but it can also be a set of value systems. And so there's a set of values that's specifically tied to persuasion that I'm going to talk about in today's video. And so when we think about persistence and persuasion, and what is different between the two of them is persistence is annoying, right? So persistence is you asking the same thing over and over again, the same way, expecting it to land at some point in time. It's kind of like playing the laws of numbers. Like at some point that person is going to kind of break down and just concede. But that's not communication. They still haven't heard your message. They're just exhausted, right? You're not being heard in a situation where someone's conceding because they're exhausted or because they're irritated. So you don't want to move toward persistence, because at some point, if that person is self-preserving, they're going to put you on a small dose plan. And so what I do with people who I find drain me or who I find are exhausting, who leverage persistence, and I find persistence to be irritating, and it's probably because as a child, like my persistence was seen as irritating. And if I could be persuasive, if I could bring up a negotiation in the situation that meant most to me, then I could be heard. But I was not going to be heard if I was being persistent. And as an adult, I find that I am not really keen on listening if someone's not being persuasive, and if they're not tailoring their conversation to the way that I need to receive it, then they're not being effectively persuasive. I mean, I'm happy to meet them halfway, but it does everyone a favor when you build your communication for the audience you have at hand. And so there are three large categories of value systems that we can think about that play into persuasion. And so I want to talk about those three in this segment, and maybe what I'll do is I'll do a second segment that ties those specific persuasive categories essentially with learning styles, so that you're not only packaging your communication based on how that person values decisions or values messages, but you're also catering it to their learning styles as well, because that will dictate the kind of words that you use so that it really evolves, it's receptive, it's received. And so the three categories for persuasion, for persuasive communication, the first one is ethos. And so ethos is a Latin term for character, and a lot of people in this world, it really doesn't matter what you say or how you say it, it's if they like you, if they find affinity with you. So you can cultivate ethos, or sometimes ethos is a byproduct of your expertise, of your domain, of your profession. All of these things can build into ethos. It's like, well, just because it's like, if I know X about this person, I'm swayed, I'm all in. And this can be something that you can figure out based on someone's value system. So ethos can be something as simple as, oh, this person does the same thing that I do. Okay, like their character is enough for me to buy into whatever it is that they're saying. Like their specific words aren't going to persuade them. They're persuaded by who that person is and what that person represents. And so if you are looking at your target audience and you see that a lot of the times the people that they align themselves to, they're just people that they feel affinity with. It doesn't matter like what that person says specifically, it's just that they feel drawn to that person, they feel a connection with that person, then you know that that person is persuaded by ethos. So you need to be very sure that that person feels an affinity with you, feels drawn towards you, because that's going to dictate if whether or not what you say lands or doesn't. And if someone does not like you and they operate from a place of ethos, then better believe nothing you say is going to convince them to align to what it is that you say. So ethos is really important. Or maybe what you need to do is, if you do not have that personal relationship there, is you establish a bridge on something that they do value. So something about character, something about integrity, something about just a persona that they can connect with, so that they can connect with the words that you are sharing in order for your message to land, which you want, because then you feel heard. And it is your job in a communication to feel heard. It is not that person's job to hear you, it is your job to make sure that your communication lands. And a lot of us, we confuse this. We feel like when we don't feel heard, it's the other person's fault, especially in romantic relationships. Whereas I'm here to say, if you don't feel heard, you failed at communication effectively. You failed to communicate effectively the point that you wanted to make. That means a lot to you. And if the point means a lot to you, then it's better to take your time to package that message in a way that it's going to land. And so the next bucket, the large persuasive bucket that I'm going to talk about, and this is the one that I fall into, is logos. And logos is the Latin term for logicals, people who need facts. They need old hard facts in order to make decisions. And it is the facts that are going to dictate what, whether they go from one side to another, which means you need to build a bit of an argument. You need to build a case. And so I'm someone who's really about CPR. And so when it is, like you said, I'm having like a conflict or I'm having a conversation with someone about behavior, then it needs to be focused on pattern person, and then relationship, right? So if it's a one-time thing, like it needs to be treated as such. It's like a one-time thing. This is the thing that happened. These are the factors and the elements around it. Yes, I can digest it. We can take a look at it. We can cover and decide what the next steps are. We can move forward. And so that's how I like to have conversations. It's not really about like, this is who I am, listen to me. Like that's not going to land when it comes to someone who operates from a place of logos. So for me, persuasion is really about the facts. It's the facts, it's the material, it's the content that's going to dictate if whether or not what you're saying is going to be heard by me. I need to have it structured. I need to have it well laid out. I need to have it make sense in my mind, right? It needs to make sense. It needs to be clear. It needs to be cohesive, and I can digest it. There are other people out there who are like that, where they cannot make a decision. They cannot align to or against what it is that you're saying if you don't give them the structure, you don't give them the runway, the roadmap. And so if you fail at communicating a message that matters to you with this kind of person, then you didn't set down your facts properly. And the only way and the best way of getting your message across is you lay out the facts, and facts, of course, that they can relate to, that they align with, that they remember. And as a byproduct of that, you get the opportunity to have your message land. And when your message lands, you feel heard. So logos, very important. And if you find that you're looking at someone, or you've targeted someone that you want to communicate to, and you find that they are someone who's very much about details, they're very detail oriented, they're very structured, they like to weigh decisions, like they're constantly doing pros and cons, they're comparing, they're contrasting, they're doing cost and benefit analyses, then you know that that person is going to need lots of facts and figures in order to be swayed from one way or another. And last but not least is pathos. And so pathos works in so many different ways, but someone who is geared or who is oriented in making decisions from an emotional perspective, like they're oriented to making emotional decisions, this is someone where it benefits you to play into their emotions. And so sometimes this is fear mongering, and I see this a lot of times, especially in commercials, where you kind of fear someone into making a decision that benefits you. And so I am someone who really deeply, I am vehemently against this, but I understand that it is very effective. Like you can scare someone a little bit, and then as a byproduct of that, you've sold them. Like they're gonna make that call, they're gonna make that purchase, they're gonna do the thing that you want. But if you wanna use this for good and not for evil, then of course you can use emotion to positively reinforce the right decisions that you're looking for. So you need to create positive emotional affect, like build connection, build a vision or a view of like a future world where, you know, specific emotions are elicited. And so when you elicit those specific emotions, the specific emotions that helps them feel aligned and connected to the message that you have in hand, then you have been successful in feeling heard. And it's really just about making sure that you always keep top of mind when you're looking at someone and you've targeted them. You have a message that you would like to be sure that is heard. You need to think about, well, how does this person take in information? Like, how do they make decisions? Is it about who the person is? Is it about the cold hard facts and the figures? Or is it about the emotional effect or the emotions that I bring up in this person as I'm bringing up this conversation? Like, how is it that I need to package my message so that it lands? Because it is my job for me to feel heard when it matters the most to me. It is not other people's job to do the heavy lifting, the labor of hearing you. It is your job to make sure that your communication is effective, and making sure your communication is effective is making sure that you package your communication for the audience in front of you. So that is the baseline, the fundamentals of communication, of communicating persuasively, which is much more effective, much more thought out, and it involves a lot more critical thinking than just talking and shooting from the hip and hoping for the best, which I wouldn't say is a great strategy for anyone at all. So that's the topic of conversation for today. That's it, but definitely not all. Now, if you are interested in having conversations around self-mastery, around inner alignment, growth, and evolution, then we do host live events twice a month, every month for the foreseeable future on our website. So definitely take a look at the events that we have scheduled for the full calendar year for 2025. And if you see an event that interests you, then by all means, make sure you register. And as it relates to my own personal stalking situation, thank you again for tuning in as it relates to that. No information for you as yet, but once I know, you will definitely know too. And I look forward to chatting with all of you very soon. We'll talk to you later.